Hi, Pastor Doug. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing really well.
Good. Time for another rotation.
I know. I'm excited. This one's about King David, God's chosen king, who had a heart for God.
A heart for God. King David. Yes, very important in our history.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting characters in this story.
Oh, yeah.
And the story is found in 1 Samuel 16, and we are focusing on verses 1 through 13, and 1 Samuel's in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And to get us started, I'd like to kind of place the story in the history of the Old Testament.
All right.
So we have the first stories starting with creation and the flood and the Tower of Babel, Abraham and Sarah who had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob and Esau, and then Jacob had 12 sons. His favorite one was Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph ended up being sold and into Egypt. His whole family ended up in Egypt. We had 400 years later, and then came Moses and the Exodus. This is going fast.
It's going fast.
Going fast.
Time is ticking.
And then leadership transferred over to Joshua, and they got into the Promised Land, and everything was good. And we ended up in the time of Judges, and that cycle of...
The people wanted a leader.
Yeah.
Like those other kingdoms.
Yes. Yes, which brings us to the last judge. There were 7. Samuel was the last judge. Mm-hmm. And there weren't other people after Samuel that were qualified to be a judge. And so...
Not even his own sons.
Not even his own sons, right. And the story of Samuel's really interesting. You might remember Hannah kept praying for a son, and her prayer was if she had one, she would give him over to God. And so Samuel was raised by Eli, and there's the famous story of Samuel hearing that voice of God in the middle of the night as a young child.
Samuel.
Yes.
Yes.
So this is that Samuel.
Yes.
And he was a very powerful prophet and judge and priest.
Yeah.
And when the people wanted a king, and God was like, well, it's not quite time, but okay, fine.
It says they whined about it.
Yeah, they whined.
They said, we want a king like all the other nations. Yeah, that's actually where they were whining about it after the judges.
Yeah, they were whining and complaining. And
give us a king.
Yeah, just like those long car trips.
That's right. Are we there yet?
Yes. Anyway, so they chose Saul. And he had this outward appearance of being this great king. And,
strong, mighty.
And kings were anointed with oil by the judge Samuel. Well, Saul turned out not to be such a great choice. But it turns out that was all part of God's plan to kind of let that happen so that the person who was his choice, that people could understand that and really get behind David and let God choose in his own time. So God was telling Samuel, hey, you need to go and anoint another king. Mm-hmm. And one of Jesse's sons.
Yeah. Saul's not working out.
Go. And Samuel was a little afraid to do that, because he knew that if Saul found out, that he would probably be killed.
Sure.
And God said, go. We've got a plan. So Samuel shows up on the scene, and the elders of the community were afraid.
Afraid also.
But they went along with the ruse that Samuel was going to do a sacrifice.
Brought a calf, I think, and said, I'm just here to sacrifice.
With Jesse and his sons. Yeah. Well, interestingly, Jesse had 8 sons, and 7 of them show up. Mm-hmm. David wasn't even mentioned by name and was so insignificant that he wasn't even considered to come to this sacrifice. Yep. So
he was the one left out tending the sheep because he wasn't important enough to even be part of that ceremony. Yeah.
Right. And the first son comes, and Samuel's like, okay, this is the guy.
Yeah. Usually the firstborn too. I mean, that was kind of the child, that would take the name of the father, carry the family name.
Right.
Yeah.
And he looked the part.
Yeah.
Yep. And
big, strong guy.
God was like, no, you're looking on the outside. Keep going. Well, they all go through.
All seven.
All seven. Mm-hmm. And none of them are picked. Yeah. And so
finally Samuel says, do you have any other sons? They said, yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
David is back there taking care of the sheep.
Yeah. So it's interesting they make everybody wait. Yeah. And there's an interesting correlation to Israel waiting mm-hmm. for a king. And so the author makes everybody wait for David to arrive.
Yeah.
And he is anointed in secret.
Mm-hmm.
Because David would also be killed if Saul.
And in fact, that fear rang true throughout the next several chapters in the story. It's very fascinating. Saul does try to kill David a number of times.
Yeah.
And David several times had an opportunity to kill Saul and doesn't do it. But it's a fascinating story. There's a lot of moving parts to it. It reads like a thriller novel.
Yeah.
1st and 2nd Samuel. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. So Samuel learns that God is looking at what's on the inside of the heart, and David had a heart for God, and he showed that with his obedience to his father. And
that's really the point of the rotation for the kids, not only to learn the story of Samuel and Saul and David, but to really make that point that God doesn't just see what's on the outside, but really where our heart is, what's on the inside. Mm-hmm. And God uses that for good.
Yeah, in his own time. So some of the things that we're working with kids on is that God is in charge, and he is working steadfastly in our lives according to his plan and at his time schedule. Mm-hmm. Kids will also learn that David, the shepherd boy, becomes Israel's greatest king, and he's an ancestor to the Messiah.
Yeah.
It's a fun ancestral history.
Sure. Today in the city of David is born to you a son, and he will be named Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's that whole lineage.
And anointing even comes from the root word in Hebrew that translates to Messiah.
Messiah. Yeah. The anointed one.
Yeah. It's such an interesting story. God sees things that people do not see. Mm-hmm. That's another thing that we talk with kids about, and that really having a heart for God. Mm-hmm. And that when God calls people to do something, he prepares them and provides for them all that they need to do his work.
Kind of the neat thing, and I don't know if you're going to get into this in the rotations, but it's just kind of an underlying reality to these stories is that God is working in and through us and through Saul and even Samuel and David, and but all of them also have their faults and they all David is the one, even though in the city of David, it is the great king, but ends up falling in love with another man's wife, Bathsheba, and we know that story too. But so it's that undercurrent that God still gives us free will. God just doesn't grab hold of us and say, you're going to do this, this, and this to my glory. That we still have control and ability in our lives to either obey God or disobey God. And anyway, I don't know if with the younger kids we'll get into that part of it, but it always fascinates me reading these stories that despite our shortcomings, that God is still able to make something good happen.
It's one of the things we can learn from studying these people in the Bible. Mm-hmm. They did make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They mess up right and left, just like all of us.
You and I? No.
Yeah. Yes.
It gives me hope. Let's put it that way.
It gives us all hope, and that God is there for that. Us, and has a plan for us.
Sure. And when you read the New Testament, the disciples are constantly getting things wrong. So it's throughout the scriptures. But to me, it's comforting that God is able that's okay. So that we don't always have to be perfect, and that's not really even what God is calling us to be. But just to have that right heart, and to continue to turn to God and look to God for, okay, well, what do I do now? What's my next step? How do I serve you, oh Lord?
Yeah.
So. Anyway, I'm kind of sidetracking. But,
no, it's good. We'll touch base with kids on that. David wrote many of the Psalms. Mm-hmm. He was famous for playing the harp and
Psalm 23, the Shepherd's Psalm.
Yeah. We have 2 memory verses for this rotation. The first one is 1 Samuel 16:7b, and we're taking the CEV version of it. That people judge others by what they look like, but I judge people by what is in their hearts. And our other one is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. I know I need to see that one a lot.
I can do
sometimes.
all things through Him who strengthens me.
So we have some fun workshops again.
Good, yeah.
I'm so excited.
Always, I'd like to know what's going on in the kitchen.
Yes. Okay. Well, that one is going to be really good. We're fixing brownies this time, 2 different kinds.
Okay.
And I don't want to give away the secret.
Okay, don't give away the secret. But it sounds like maybe I need to come visit that rotation.
They're called
station.
Abinadab and David brownies. I'll let you ponder that.
Okay.
It'll be good. We're watching excerpts from the movie King David.
Okay.
In the movie room, and touching base again on having that heart for God and anointing. In our games rotation, we're playing a fun game called Guess and Know, which will take a look at all of the facts and in the story and the different parts of the story and put it all together.
Okay.
In a fun way. And then we're doing a special storytelling workshop this time too, and really taking the time to ponder God in our lives and how might God be working in our life right now, preparing us for something greater in the future, and really taking the time.
And what is our story?
Yeah.
And how does God relate to that?
Yep.
Wonderful. Good.
There's some fun questions, maybe not fun, but good questions for parents and people to ask kids at home too. What are some of the aspects of outward appearance that are considered important in our society?
Sure.
Physical characteristics, clothing, cars, homes. One of the things that points out in the story of David, that David was attractive, and God used his attractiveness, and that was part of his charisma and being able to connect with both men and women that helped him in his kingship too.
Yeah.
What are the qualities of a good leader in politics, in the church?
Okay.
And why do you think God chose David to become king? And why do you think God chose a young boy instead of a mature adult to become the next king? I wonder if there's a connection there between young boy David being chosen and Jesus being sent as an infant.
Yeah.
I don't know. Good question.
Good question.
Yeah.
I'll have to think of that one myself. That's good. Good insight.
All right.
Good. Well, there's it's again going to be a wonderful rotation, and have fun with it.
Thank you.
You bet. And I'll see you in the kitchen, or I'll see you at church.
Yeah, in the kitchen and at Sunday school.
In the Sunday school.